Hi, this is Pat McDonald, your host for Vote for Vermont, where our tagline is listening beyond the sound bites. Today with me is Dexter Lefavour, who is running for the Washington County Senate. Welcome.
Thank you, Pat. It's great to be here.
It's great. You must be tired by now. You've been on the road a while.
I'm a little weary, and I've just come in from the woods. I've been out logging with my son. He's building a cabin on our property, and we're logging the trees and cutting the boards on our sawmill.
Oh, good for you.
So I've been out being a woodchuck all morning.
There you go.
So I'm weary from that as well.
We stacked our cord of wood yesterday. That was yesterday's project, so a little stiff, but that's great. So could you tell folks, I'm sure they do know a little bit about you, but you could tell them a little about your background?
Sure thing. I grew up outside of Boston, 20 miles north of Boston, a town called Danvers. I was born in Salem. My mother's not a witch, although I frequently say that she is.
Yes, when you were growing up, maybe, right?
So we were tent campers as a family, and we traveled to northern New England to go camping. Some of those trips brought us to Vermont. So I gained some familiarity with the state there, but I just really developed a love for the mountains and a love for the outdoors through that. And I climbed all the New England 4,000-foot peaks with my father.
Excellent.
By the time I graduated from college, which was 78, and then I worked in Boston as an engineer. I'm a civil engineer, and I worked in Boston for a consulting firm from 78 until 81, and then I found a job in Burlington.
Great.
Moved to Burlington in 1981. I've been here ever since.
I'm glad you're here. I mean, seriously, the colors this year are just been amazing. Everybody's got to fall in love with this place.
Yeah, the colors are always amazing. This was a good year.
Yeah, it was a great year. So the big question everybody asks you, I'm sure, is why are you running for the Senate?
Well, part of the reason there's a lot of reasons why I'm running, right? So it's not just one reason. So this particular year, when I looked at the lineup for the primaries, I noticed that out of 30 Senate seats, 22 seats were unopposed.
Yeah.
And I just really didn't feel like the Senate should just be handed over to the Democratic Party that way. So I worked with the Libertarian Party and the Republican Party to recruit candidates.
Great.
I consider myself an independent, but sought to find opposition to the Democrats that were running unopposed. So through a coordinated effort, we reversed that. So we got like 22 or more Republican candidates running.
Good for you.
After all the work I did and the people who stepped up, I felt like I ought to step up as well. So there was nobody else wanting to run for this seat.
Now you ran I didn't actually understand how this worked for a write-in. How did that work to get you on the ballot? Yeah,
so that's a standard way to get on the ballot with the write-in. I mean, you can write in a general election or write in a primary. So you need, I believe you need half of the required number of votes as you would need signatures on a petition. So I needed 50 votes to win the write-in. And I got 250.
Good for you.
Like a 4-day campaign.
That's a landslide, huh?
So it was fun. It was all an email and text messaging off my phone through my own contacts list.
Great. Well, I got one too, so there you go.
You're on my contacts list.
I am. Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah.
I know write-ins, but I've never really thought about it. And then when I saw your name on the ballot, I said, how did it get here?
Yeah.
Because that's great.
Right, so that got me through, and that got me the Republican nomination.
Right.
And there's no Libertarian primary. And then there's also a provision where parties, if they don't have a candidate after the primary, they can nominate them by committee. And that was an option that we did in most of the districts, actually, to fill those Senate seats. They were nominated by committee. Right. And I got the Libertarian Party nomination as well.
Excellent. Good for you. Good for you. So all the stuff I've read about you on your website and a few other things, that you are really focusing on Vermont's motto of freedom and unity. Could you share with us why that's ringing a bell for you and means so much to you?
Well, to me, there's nothing wrong with freedom or unity,
right?
Right? So it's funny. It goes back to my 2014 campaign, I think, which was when Hurricane Irene hit. And when that disaster happened, government wasn't there to take care of people immediately. Neighbors had to step up and help each other. Yep. People were evacuating people from isolated towns in their
Yeah.
own vehicles or with heavy, and making equipment repairs with heavy equipment on their own initiative. And I got a sense that the freedom that occurred as a result of government not being present was really powerful. And the unity that resulted in that disaster was also really powerful. So, I mean, I could go on and on about freedom and unity, but, you know, my campaigns have always been about freedom in all areas. Healthcare freedom, education freedom, energy freedom, right? I'm really sort of anti-mandates in all areas. And I think we saw a lot of loss of freedom around the COVID.
I thought, you know, the year after Irene, I thought for sure that we would see a lot of change in the regulations, loosening up of the regulations, because just like you said, my road was almost impassable. In order to get down, you actually needed help in front of your car because it was just mostly eroded, and the neighbors fixed it. And the darn thing lasted longer than when we get it done professionally. And Route 4, you could just name all of these roads, and they just waived a lot of regulations, but no. They wouldn't budge.
With freedom, we get things done.
Yep, that's true. And people come together. And you also, speaking of freedom and unity, the Vermont Constitution is something that you talk a lot about. And you said in particular, Chapter 1, Article 18, which you wrote about. Could you explain that for us?
Yeah, you want to just, do you have the full quote there?
I do not, sadly.
Oh, you don't? So temperance, which is moderation. So that's definitely an attitude that I would want to bring to the Senate. And also it reflects a lifestyle that is not excessive.
Well, the Senate this year is going to change a lot, isn't it?
Right. There's a lot of turnover. I'm not sure the exact numbers in the Senate, but they're losing like 2/3
they're
of the
losing a lot of
legislature.
people.
Temperance, maybe moderation is in there. Frugality.
Frugality, yes,
Yeah,
that's right.
that's in there. So, I mean, those are all things that
who
I
we
think,
are.
values that are kind of lost. But fundamentally, that's who we are.
That's good. Just roll up the sleeves and get her done. And just so you all know, it's Dexter4, the number 4, VT.com.
Great.
I'll give you a plug. That you've got many priorities, and we've got plenty of time to talk about them. And I would encourage you to go to Dexter's website, because on each of these things he has written an awful lot of information and would help explain his position on these items. So I thank you for that.
And I appreciate the plug.
Well, I actually read them all, so there you go. So the first one that you had down was gun rights and violence in America, and we're certainly seeing violence in America these days.
So the violence in America is very, very sad. You know, we're seeing shootings in Vermont almost every weekend now. My sense of it is, without doing formal research, is that most of that is drug-related violence. And I see that really as a result of a black market for drugs. And I think that as a legislator, I would like to work to eliminate that market 2 ways. One way is to reduce the demand, you know, which I think can be done through education, to get people off drugs or away from drugs, to stay away from drugs. I think society's done that well with alcohol and
smoking.
tobacco. There's much less of that. And so if you could relax, reduce, or even eliminate the market side of the black market, that would help. And then the other side is the supply side, I guess. But it really, you know, if the drugs are illegal and there's a market for it, it's going to be there. So, you know, better enforcement of crime. We've got a real, you know, right now we've got a workforce crisis in every sector. Law enforcement is no exception, really, since COVID. I think that the police have just been overwhelmed, loss of workers, and just an inability really to keep up with the demands that they have on their time. So
I don't know where workers are anymore, because I think all the things you were talking about, frugality, that's what Vermont is. It's, you know, get her done. And I don't know where those people who have those kind of basic traits, where they are. They're not working. It's pretty scary.
Yeah, the workforce thing is really kind of odd. I think it's maybe a perfect storm of a lot of things. I think that the COVID shutdowns didn't help. I think a lot of people moved out of the workforce
Right.
during that and have not returned or have returned in a lesser capacity. I also think, again, in the black market situation, a lot of people work off the books.
Yeah, under the old table.
So they're able to make more money under the table than they
Right,
make
sure.
on the books and get away with it. So they found a comfortable way of life.
Yeah.
Out of the
I've
system.
heard there's a trend now for people, when they need money, they go to work like a temporary, and then when they've gathered a few bucks, they step back and wait till the next cycle of no money, and that's how they're working.
For
But
some people, that's a week-to-week thing, right?
it doesn't help with your career. I don't think people are
Yeah.
talking career much anymore.
Right.
Because if, as a HR director, you would look at somebody's background and go, nope, not hiring this guy.
Right.
So, anyway, the second thing you have down is constitutional government, which you've got my vote for that.
Mm-hmm.
Let's pay attention to what was written.
Right. So getting back to those values of temperance and frugality and moderation, I think that our government has really just kind of gone the other way.
Yeah.
We're trying to be all things to all people and, working towards increasing the affordability of Vermont is one of my real functions, and we definitely have a government that we can't afford right now.
Right.
So we need to get sensible about our priorities and our policies, and live within our means. Vermont's been very progressive over the last 20 years in promoting renewable energy, solar, wind, and other improvements. A lot of that's, we've made great strides, but we spent a
Right.
lot of money that really probably would have been better spent
Right.
alleviating poverty, putting food on people's tables.
Do you
Things like that.
know, I just did a show recently. It used to be 1 in 3 Vermonters dealt with food insufficiency, then 1 in 4, and now it's 2 in 5. That's, what is that percentage?
40%.
40% of
Yeah.
people in this state, in an agricultural state, are dealing with food insufficiency. It just like makes your mind blow.
Yeah.
It just
And
makes
that's
me crazy.
affordability.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
because people can't afford to put food on the table, let alone put good food on the table, which is even more expensive.
Right, exactly.
Right?
Yeah, to remain healthy,
Right.
you have to spend a few bucks.
Right.
Yep. So many of those ramen noodles, you can only eat so many. And then on healthcare freedom, you talked a lot about healthcare, but also about the Green Mountain Care Board, which I find of interest.
Oh, yeah. So the Green Mountain Care Board is the king of all healthcare in Vermont, right?
No oversight.
Most of the healthcare providers, when I say most, because it's not all. There are a very small number of healthcare providers that work outside of the system. But it's the Green Mountain Care Board that calls all the shots, tells them what they can do, what they can't do. I don't know. My sense is that doctors have their hands tied. They have to work within certain guidelines to keep their funding going. They have to speak certain narratives,
Right.
Which we heard during COVID.
It's a business,
we
right?
see, doctors that don't speak the narrative get sanctioned
Yep.
or fired.
Yeah.
Or both, and that's not freedom in my mind, And I really, with healthcare, I'm a 2-time cancer survivor. I've had prostate cancer once, and it was treated, and it recurred, and it was treated again.
Good.
And it didn't go away, but I've made it 5 years since the second
Good for
treatment,
you.
so I'm a survivor.
Yes, you
right? But since the second treatment failed, I've taken natural means to treat the cancer.
Really?
And it is going away.
Whoa.
One of the nice things about prostate cancer is that you have a PSA, and they can measure
Right,
the amount that you
right.
have in your body. And mine's been diminishing
Good for you.
since I did a bunch of things like Chinese herbs, cut way back on coffee, sugar, meat, dairy. So I've gone sort of vegetarian and organic food, and
it's working.
added herbs. Yeah, and
Good
it's
for
working.
you.
It's working quite.
There's a show in
quite
itself.
Well. It is a show.
One of
in
us who has
itself.
also had cancer twice is
Yeah.
very bad on that list you just mentioned. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm.
Well, there's a
I'm-
whole theory that if your body is alkaline, which you can achieve by eating an alkaline diet,
Right.
that cancer can't grow in an alkaline body.
Huh,
So
that's good. I should pay attention.
I went with it, and it seems to be working for
Well,
me.
whatever works, that's a good thing. Thank you for that. So you also talked about a supportive government. And what does that mean in your mind about what that
Well, I
means?
think that I'd like to see government be more supportive rather than confrontational, rather than adversarial.
Yep.
More of a partner than an adversary. So I think the appropriate role for government in many areas is to be educational rather than regulatory.
We'd love you for that.
Energy is a perfect area. I don't think that we should be mandating that everyone gets an electric car or everyone converts to electric heat.
Right.
I think government can be educational about the ways that people can improve their impact on the climate,
Right.
and improve their situation with energy consumption, and that's an appropriate role for government.
That's
So
great.
I just built a passive house, my second house, and with education and being informed by people who are really into it, I decided to make a small extra investment to make a house that has a very, very low energy
Good for you.
requirement.
So you're sort of
great.
semi-living off the grid or a little bit off the grid?
It's
or-
just super insulated.
Great.
I've got 12-inch walls and an 18-inch roof.
Wow.
And it's just imported windows from Ireland.
And you can really feel the difference and see the difference?
Yeah, I have a 500-gallon propane tank that I heat from, and it's not once a year that you have to fill it.
Good grief, that's
Yeah.
great. Well, I know there's a big push for weatherization, and I have become somewhat of a convert on that. I used to think, oh my God, how many times we can talk about weatherization? But I've seen the statistics, and it does help, and it does help people with the heating and staying healthy.
Yeah, and I just would like to add one thing about weatherization is weatherization needs to be done right. So
Oh,
you can
oh,
just
that's
go seal all the cracks and stuff insulation in all kinds of places, but it's important to deal with moisture control.
Yep.
And also be aware of ventilation requirements for the house as well, because once you
great.
tighten things up, you may be
You
suffocating
know what
yourself.
scares me is when you were talking about heating, that they were looking at last year, the year before last, about wood-burning stoves and whether they should go or not, and,
Yep.
and telling us what we can use in our house. I would have a problem with that one.
So you stacked your cord of wood. So I've got 2 of my 6 cords of wood are
Oh,
stacked.
wow, you
and
really burn.
I can't take credit for it. I got my wife and my daughter did
Good
all
for
that
them.
stacking this year, and my son is working on getting the other 4 cords ready to be stacked. So,
Whoa.
but I'll do my share if I have to.
Tell them you're busy campaigning.
But
that's
you
it.
know, I have an old wood stove. I have an old Vermont casting wood stove. I'm in the process of rebuilding it for the second time. I'm reluctant to go to the new level of technology.
Yeah.
You know, cord. So some numbers. I'm an engineer, so I'm into numbers. Cordwood is the cheapest source of heat.
Right.
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 And it's I think it's $30 per 1,000 BTUs.
Huh.
And if you go to I'm sorry, $15
Okay,
per 1,000
right.
BTU. And if you go to oil or propane, it's about double that, $30 per 1,000. If you go to electric heat,
Oh, yeah,
it's
well,
double that.
right.
But that's what the state's pushing everyone
Yeah,
towards.
well, we bought our house and it had electric heat. I think within a week, Bruce had it ripped out, and we put it in our System 2000 at the time. That was the ultimate.
very
but
expensive.
we burn a lot of
Yeah.
wood. I just love the smell. I love it. Anyway, going down this list this is 100% citizen participation. I'm going to be anxious to see this year, since we all got our ballots mailed, what excuse people can come up with for not voting.
So it's not the first time we've done the vote by mail.
Oh, I
this way.
didn't know that. When-
They did during COVID.
Oh, that's right, of course, COVID,
Right?
but-
And the turnout was fair. It wasn't exceptional, but
Yeah.
it might have been a little better or something. So it made no big difference, I don't think. So,
That's too
but
bad.
we'll see how it is this time. It's almost like it's still experimental, being
Yeah.
only the second
Because if
time.
I don't like something and it gets passed with like a small minority, a small majority,
Yeah.
I get annoyed. But if it's a really big number, I'll say, all right, well, that's what Vermonters want.
Yeah.
I'll just keep quiet and not complain about it.
If I had to vote on that bill, I would have listened to my constituents and tried to represent their wishes
Right.
as best I could.
Right.
Personally, I didn't really think it was a good idea. I think it's, just on face value, I think it's an opportunity for fraud.
Right.
But my experience with it now is I think it's a pretty good thing. And one of the good things I think about it is everyone's got the ballot at home.
Right.
It's on the kitchen table.
Right.
You could do your research if you want to.
Right.
You can go right to the internet if you've got decent internet at home.
And if you make a mistake, not that I know this personally, but you can go up to the town clerk and she will shred your thing and give you a new one.
You don't even have to make a mistake. You can just want to change your mind.
Well,
or fill in a blank you
I
didn't fill
actually made a
in.
mistake. We're going to talk about the changes to the Vermont Constitution. I didn't realize there were two. So I answered the one I saw as thinking it was the one I knew about. So and I went, what is this? But anyway, let's just finish this list and then we'll make sure we have time for this. Farm and food, we were just talking about food insufficiency. I hope, do you have good ideas to help our farmers? Because God bless them.
Well, I think the trend to large farms, especially in dairy, has not been good for Vermont. So I'd really like to find ways to make it easier for small farmers to survive.
Yep.
We've got regulations that just aren't small farmer friendly. Maybe by design, maybe not by legislator design, but maybe by those that inform the legislative process. So anyway, I'd like to reduce the barriers to small farmers, and especially the barriers to entry to young people who want to get into farming.
Right.
It is so hard, and not just farming, but any small business, for a young person to start out. I mean, we really need to be flexible enough. And this is a place where government can be supportive too. Right?
Yeah, help our young people.
When I went into farming, which was, I don't know, it was about 20 years ago now, when I wanted to get serious about farming, I reached out to the UVM Extension Service, which is a USDA ag support thing, and they said, okay, you've got to come to school, you've got to take a course, and then you're going to have to be prepared to borrow $500,000.
Oh.
And I'm like, I just want to grow some beets and sell them, right?
Exactly.
Right, so.
Well, that's a good point, because I think that could even attract young people to come to Vermont if we help them to get started in farming and make some of these, like organic farming is very expensive to get started, right? You have to wait quite a few years for the soil to be able to be called organic. But that's a great idea. And I think children seem to be interested in farming. The young people seem to be.
Kids love to grow. Young kids love to grow. Love to get dirty.
Not dirt. Yeah. Okay, the other two is educational freedom, which is going to be an interesting discussion. I'll get my dander up.
Yeah. So, wow.
Yeah. We could have another hour after this.
Yeah. I had the TV on yesterday. It doesn't happen very often, but someone mentioned our schools have become indoctrination centers.
Yes.
And I really can't say that I disagree with that statement. And I really think that we need to look at that. Again, this is an area where centralization, continued conglomeration, bigger schools, just isn't really producing good results.
No.
So, and then as far as more along the lines of freedom, I think school choice really ought to be a thing.
I think so too. Competition is not a bad thing in schools.
Competition would help, and the other thing, affordability. That's our biggest expense is our schools,
right?
And that's really what sets us apart from the rest of the country is how much we spend on education.
And I don't think the results are right up on the. We're not the top as far as our the results of school, right?
Yeah, we're not. Yeah, we're in the top 4 of spending, but not in the top 4 results. But we do get good results. But a lot of people fall through the cracks because it's not. The big system is not right for everyone.
Right.
We need more options, and we need to be creative. We need to find a lower cost way of educating. We've sort of.
My thing has always been tech ed.
Tech ed is great.
2 years, half the price, if not even half, probably.
Yeah.
And you graduate, and you can make $50,000-$60,000 just walking out of school in a trade.
Yeah.
And sometimes you graduate with a degree that's hard to find a job.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Yeah.
Anyway, and of course the last one that you've got down here is economic freedom, which I think we all yell help.
Yeah, I don't know. Economic freedom is probably a pretty broad thing, but I just challenge, I think, anyone to identify a business that's not controlled by the state, right?
Well, you've been up to the legislature, and you sometimes listen to their discussions, and I've been doing a lot of lobbying, actually, and I've been covering legislature, now that we're home looking at live stream, I'm home yelling. Thank God they can't hear me. But I'm like, what are you doing? Pay attention. You need ideas. You don't have to have the idea, but if you throw an idea on the table, it'll start a discussion, and maybe they could solve some of these problems. You and I were just talking when you ran last, you looked at the brochures and stuff you had, and I've looked back. They're the same. It's the same problems. Maybe a little different shading, a little different here and there, nuance, but it's.
We did mention that affordability has gotten worse.
Yep.
But another thing, and this sort of relates to constitutional government, and you mentioned the live streaming. And I don't know if you've had the same observation, but the legislature through COVID has really, I think, shut the public out of the process. There's just a real lack of public hearings. Although you can watch on YouTube, you can't participate.
That's true.
And those who testify in committee are by invitation. As a citizen, I've requested multiple times to testify on bills, and I was just ignored or denied access. Yes. And I would sit there and I would watch the testimony from invited state agencies, special interest groups. And it's just.
And they didn't answer you back?
No. A lot of times I would get no answer. Sometimes I would get a no. Sometimes I would reach out to my legislator who would refer it to somebody.
Right.
And then nothing would happen.
Wow.
Or by then it would be too late. That's the other thing that happens is they publish a schedule on Friday for next week.
Right.
And then Monday, it all changes.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
I was going to say, and it changes. You know, when you cover the legislature, you have to go every day because they change.
Right.
And the only benefit of that, in quotes, is that in those committee rooms, there's probably room for maybe, 10, maybe 15 people. But I've noticed watching the committees, there could be 45, 50 people. But if they're not allowed to testify, then what's the point?
Right.
I'm sorry to hear that. That upsets me.
It's hard. And the other thing is this is happening at select boards and school boards as well.
Right.
The same sort of thing. And they will go through, they'll have a set agenda, they'll go through it, they'll have public comment, they'll limit it to 5 or 10 minutes at the beginning of the meeting. They'll give each individual 2 minutes maybe to speak. At the end of that 2 minutes, they're silenced. They move on to agenda items, but don't allow any public input on the agenda items. So you don't even know what your input might be until you hear the legislative body's discussion about it. And maybe they have public comment at the end, but the vote's already happened.
And who do you think is that the Secretary of State's role? Because a friend of mine is in a town that's really in trouble at the moment, and they've been writing about it, and Dave Delcourt's been writing about it, and there's a lot of frustration of exactly what you're talking about, plus the misuse of executive session. When you go into executive session, you're supposed to say, we're going in to discuss
And
contract
why?
A, B, C,
Yep.
but you don't vote in executive session.
No.
You then come out and vote. No.
Wow.
And so the Secretary of State's office was called, and maybe if you get to the legislature, you can make sure that they pay attention. Because the League of Cities and Towns is really there for the select board members and the municipality as an entity, not the citizens.
Yep.
So where do citizens go when they're frustrated?
It's interesting because I believe that there was an employee of the Secretary of State's office that was at a meeting, a U32 school board meeting, where I was blocked from speaking for some reason.
They have to shape up over there.
And we did have some communication, and he did indicate that it was wrong. He gave me some guidance, and I think I reached out to an attorney.
Oh.
But I didn't pursue it further, and I don't remember how it ended up.
But they should have authority.
They had some, I don't know if they had authority, but they had interest.
Yeah. They should, and they should be able to sanction or do something because they're elected officials and there's rules. They certainly have rules in the State House about how to conduct yourself. And of course, I mean, they can sort of get yelled at.
So I've been in the process, so there's 23 towns in this district now, right? It's all of Washington
Yep.
County plus Braintree, Orange, and Stowe. And I've been in the process to go into every select board and city council in the district. And it's remarkable the difference in the way the groups
Right.
conducted meetings. There was one town that wouldn't allow me to speak at all as a candidate because I was a candidate, and the select board stated that that was their policy. So I said,
There you go. Don't let
okay,
people know who you are.
right? And then there were some towns that were operating, like I said, in the same manner where they allow limited public comment in the beginning, but no public comment on agenda items through the meeting.
Well, and when did Stowe got added when we redid the redistricting recently?
Yes.
Because that's huge.
Yeah.
I mean, that's Heidi Sherman's
Right.
area.
And as you'd expect, some of the boards engaged with me more than others.
Right.
Stowe was great.
Oh, Stowe. Well, I think Heidi's spoiled them, I
Yeah.
think, a little
Yeah.
because she spent a lot of time doing
Yep.
the legislative job, and they
Yep.
loved her.
Yep.
But that's great. Anyway, so I guess when you're a legislator, what would you hope to accomplish? It's very hard to break into that group, although now there'll be so many new people, it might be a little easier because everybody's going to be sort of on the learning curve. What would you like to see happen that first year you're in there?
Oh boy, I'd like to see a lot happen, right?
Right.
So I'm thinking about it, and right now I'm really focused on getting elected, right? If I don't get elected, it's not going. The answer to that question is not going to matter. So rather than try to spend time developing a list of the first 10 or 20 bills that I would introduce on day one, I'm not going to do that. But I will say that I would like to introduce 10 or 20 bills on day one, and I would do the legwork necessary to make that happen, with or without support of legislative council and others. I mean, I've been around legal documents my whole professional career, and I can take a template and I can follow a template, and I've seen a lot of bills. Yeah, we could have a lot of fun with that.
Well, I think, and even if they don't all get taken up, they get stuck on the wall somehow or other, they're still there, and people know you're active and watching and paying attention, and you at least get an opportunity to talk to the committee about the bill and hopefully get
another thing that I
interest.
promised to do is to introduce legislation that any constituent wants me to propose.
Good for you.
Right?
Good for you.
And if it's something that I feel there's another legislator that might be in a better position to move their issue forward, I'll refer them to them. But if not, I will stand up for them.
Great, good for
That's something I've done all my life, is stand up for the little person. And I would,
I think it's good to stand up on the floor of the House or the Senate, either body, and really speak about bills and fight for your constituents on the floor. Whether you win or lose, their voice is out there through you. And I'm very surprised that a lot of the legislators who in all their years have never once stood up on the floor to argue a bill, other than maybe presenting a bill from their committee. But I've always been bothered by that. I just think stand up and be involved.
Yeah.
Because it's not just the bills in your committee, it's all the bills.
Okay, you might need to remind me of that one, but I'm happy to do that once I'm there.
Oh yeah, no, for real, just stand up and fight. Anyway, there's two items I wanted to talk about that actually you and I, well, I may as well do it now. You and I was responding to somebody about Proposition 5, and I'm going to be good about it because it's a passion of mine, and my vote would not be yes. So, but you gave me language back in response that talked about, and I guess I never really read all the language because it talked about, I'm going to read this. Proposition regarding an individual, they don't say woman, they say individual, so that could be man or woman, the right to personal reproductive autonomy, and shall not be denied or infringed unless justified by, and this is my question, a compelling state interest achieved by the least restrictive means. What does that mean to you?
I think that could mean just about anything.
That's what I'm afraid of.
And after seeing the performance of our governments over the COVID crisis, I can really see that meaning some scary things. And you know, well, you could look at it from both ways, right? We've got a workforce shortage. We need workers. So maybe if a woman gets pregnant, we can't let that pregnancy go to waste. We need more workers.
Need people.
And that would be that could be a compelling interest of the state. As could be the other extreme, right? We've got climate crisis as a result of too much human population.
Right.
So we can't have babies.
Yep.
Like China, right? With the one child per family.
1.5 or something.
Yeah.
There was a legislator who shall completely remain nameless, who said exactly that on the economic thing, that don't have children, and she went on about abortion, and I thought, oh my Lord.
And that constitutional article leaves that
open.
That caveat to the state.
Yeah.
And I think it could go anywhere.
It could.
Who knows? It's things that we couldn't even imagine now.
Yeah, right? I guess I knew what it meant, that it was on-demand 9-month abortion, and I knew that. But I guess I never, and I really, what, in heaven's name, speaking of having your state interfere or be involved in everything, that's a bit much.
Yeah.
That decision certainly should be.
Much more personal.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Anyway, so that was the one thing. And the second one was proposal number 2, which changes our language in our Constitution to prohibit slavery. Now that, I mean, who's going to say no to that necessarily? But I don't understand. We never heard about it. The press never covered it. And I follow the State House all the time. I didn't know. And now it also said about prohibit slavery and indentured servitude, which could also mean a lot of things besides what we're thinking about Civil War slavery. That could be expanded as well in definition, which may or may not, may be a good thing.
Yeah, so I wish I knew the backstory to this as well, and I haven't heard much, so I'm sort of guessing. Somewhere recently I came across a thing, an article somewhere that was talking about prisoners' rights and likening work in prisons to indentured servitude. One of the things about Vermont's constitution as it relates to indentured servitude is it's voluntary indentured servitude. So there's no indication in this article that you could still enter into voluntary indentured servitude, which is basically agreeing to provide labor in exchange for something else.
For housing or whatever.
Yeah, right.
Anyway, I guess I was thinking about, I interviewed a woman who was talking about bringing women over for sex here in Vermont, and that's apparently there's a trail, and it's a whole enterprise. And I would think that might be something that would fall into this language. I just think the media and the legislature did us a disservice. This is changing our Constitution, and nobody covered it. I think they just figured, well, they saw the word, no slavery, and who's going to vote no? But there's more to this than meets the eye. And I wish I had heard the conversation.
If it is to solve human trafficking of any kind, of people of any gender, is wrong.
Exactly.
And it's flat out illegal. And we should do more to enforce the laws around these things.
I'm disappointed that somebody, whoever brought this up, I think I get what they were trying to do, but then it's so ambiguous, I'm not quite sure what's going to happen.
As is the other article, right?
Yeah, right. And it takes a while to change the Constitution. It takes 2 years in the legislature, and then a public hearing, which is what we're having now, although there's no hearing, there's just a vote.
Right.
So it's unnerving to me.
It's out to the voters. It seems pretty innocuous. It seems like a feel-good measure on face value. But
well, it's the same with Proposition 5. How do you argue about a woman's right to choose?
Right. Right.
Until you dig into it, and there's some questions that come to my mind anyway.
Yeah.
I'm a little berserk about it, but that's another story. Anyway, I don't know, I'm involved with Campaign for Vermont, and we pushed the ethics bill the last couple of years and did a lot of testifying on it. And this year, when the ethics bill comes back, it was voted on, there will be the enforcement part of it that you would have to deal with as a legislator. Have you thought about, and this is ethics, it's an overarching bill, like there's an ethics form that the governor makes you sign when you get appointed to a position. The legislature has its ethics committee, and the judiciary has an ethics policy, but this sort of ties it all together in very basic things you shouldn't do as a legislature, conflict of interest and that sort of thing.
Mostly around financial issues, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
Right.
And you know the kind of work you do, and you're like I always compliment Jim Condos. He worked for a power company, I think, in Burlington, and whenever there was a bill, he would stand up and say, "This is a conflict of interest for me." And he would make a note of it. And now the legislature could also then vote and say, no, don't worry about it. We know you, and we don't see how a conflict would interfere with your vote here. Or they could say, right, sit down. But it's there are a lot of conflicts in Vermont. It's a small state. Everybody, you yourself wear how many hats? You just do.
Right.
And so you should step forward.
Right. If you live here and a citizen, you're basically, anything you do in the legislature
Right.
is going to affect you one way or another.
So the issue is going to be, what's the penalty if you knowingly break the ethics law?
Well, yeah, there should be penalties. But my cut at ethics is that we really need to have much broader ethics policy. I don't think that just being concerned about legislators' business and financial practices is enough. I think it needs to be broader. I think it needs to extend to include state employees as well, all state, which I think it does.
It does.
But I think it also needs to go broader in that it needs to be just any sort of ethics.
Right.
So I'm thinking about constitutional rights
Oh.
really ought to be protected by legislators taking an oath. Right. And I think that should be part of the ethics monitoring is to look at that. And just general human ethics. I'm not sure I'm finding the right words.
It's one of those words, you know it when you see it.
Ethics?
If it's broken.
Right.
You know it when you see it, but
Right.
sometimes hard to define.
And I think the legislature could be self-regulating in that standpoint. I think that there could be a committee of 3 or more people that would review an ethics case. But I think it should be broader than just finance and business. Yeah. I think it really should go into all behavior.
That's interesting.
Like this stuff around the excluding the public, only taking testimony by
that would be
by
great.
invitation.
Right.
I mean, that's an ethical issue in my eyes.
Yep.
And I don't think, I know the ethics bill that's in place doesn't touch that.
No, it doesn't. That's interesting. That would be a great discussion to have.
Yeah.
Because I know my friend and all of her people that she knows in her town, they're very upset right now that this select board is just doing its thing and nobody's stopping them.
Right.
And they're clearly in the wrong.
Right.
Although,
and you could be one member of that select board that does see an ethical issue, and you could be outvoted.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Right.
And you don't.
But if I was that one, I would stand up and I would state my opinion.
Yes, you would.
Right.
I know that
You
about
know I
you.
would.
I know that about you. Anyway, we've got a few more minutes. I guess I just wanted to talk about how you're going out meeting people and what you're hearing from them. Are they pretty much on the same page with your concerns, or have you heard some things that have surprised you about their concerns?
Boy, you know, I'm surprised that guns and abortion don't come up more often. I really thought, I really don't hear about it much.
Interesting.
Of course, I'm all focused on affordability, and if you look at the main areas of like energy, environment, healthcare, there's more. But anyway, affordability rings true in all areas. So mostly I end up talking about affordability. Most people nod their head. If they do have an issue, and energy is really like a real hot button right now, because the Democrats want to take the progressive policies that we've had for the last 20 years that have starved Vermonters
Right.
over that period of time and push them forward into the future, but on steroids,
Right,
right? We
right.
just want to go to the next level on this stuff. And I don't see that as affordable. I really see that as
And you know,
harmful.
we are so small in the environmental world.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know what we could do to make a dent in that scale of 1 to 10, because we're so tiny. We're like a little minuscule drop of sand on the beach.
We've made a dent,
Yeah.
you know, and we've made a dent in weatherization.
Well,
as
that's
well.
true. That I agree with you.
But we've only made a dent,
Yeah.
you know. Maybe if we went all into weatherization, we could have accomplished more and helped people that really need it.
Right.
But, you know, taxing people's electric bills and taking the money and giving wealthy people rebates to put solar panels on their houses
Maybe not.
is not
Right.
not fair, not
Right,
equitable,
right.
not ethical again, right?
There you go, back to ethics. Now
Back
that
to
could be
it, yeah.
included. Yeah, because we need to.
Constitutional government. Is that really constitutional? Probably.
Could you talk a little bit about what the Libertarian Party, what it is? And I know I should know that, and I'm going to apologize to folks because I know a few folks who are libertarian. What does that mean? It really means get out of my backyard, correct? I mean, it means no government, little government interference.
Yeah, you know, there are members of the Libertarian Party that want no government interference. There are anarchists that
Yeah.
way.
Oh,
And,
wow.
and you'll find the same thing is true in the Progressive Party, right?
Right.
You've got extremists everywhere. But in general, libertarians do recognize that there are commons, air, soil, water, for example, are areas that need to be shared, need to be regulated.
Right.
So there's a role for government in that. But in general, it just puts personal freedom, personal choice first.
I like that.
So it's all about individualism,
Right.
which is sort of the fundamental rights of the fundamentals of the Republican platform as well. They really promote individualism. But I think that Republicans, fewer anarchists in the Republican Party than in the Libertarian Party, but you've got statists. You've got a lot of members of the Republican Party that really think the government knows a better way of life for everyone.
Really?
Yeah, I think that the pro-life movement, for example,
Well,
the ones that would have zero
Right.
abortion.
Right. Yeah, I'm not there.
That's just an example, and you know, and it is an extreme example, and I only pointed out to explain how members of the party
Right.
would be considered statist,
Right.
where they think the government should enforce that
Yeah.
rule on everyone.
I think there is a limited role for government for sure, as you were just, because we would have chaos if there. You need some rules and regulations. Have you found when you're walking around, one big thing for me these days is the personal freedom to speak your mind and not to get, because people are so angry. You know, if you say something they disagree with. I have a couple of friends who left the legislature this year, and one of them told me the reason that she is leaving is because for years it used to be your bill, my bill, and the best bill, which was the compromise bill. But now it's my bill or no bill. And if you voice an opinion different, you really get pushback, if not totally insulted.
Yeah.
Have you experienced that out there in any of your debates or discussions where people really don't want to hear your side?
I experienced that a lot in an initial contact, where someone already has a position on an issue that's contrary to mine. A lot of times they will sort of angrily reject
Right.
the possibility that there's another point of view. Usually if they will engage in
Then you can-
discussion,
right.
we can move through that. But not everyone's willing to engage.
Yeah. Well, I have found, I mean,
so-
I'm sure you see it, people are just angry.
Yeah.
And I think it's the frustration of not having
Yeah.
the money that you want to have, seeing money being sent elsewhere where in fact it should be
Yeah.
given to the folks who live here, and you know, you want to be able to drive your car to work, that'd be great, without sweating how you're going to feed your kids.
Yeah.
So they're just angry.
There are people angry and on both sides of the aisle, right?
Have you thought about when you go to the legislature what committee you'd like to I know you're focused on winning at the moment, but that's a big decision to make. They let you, I think, have
Yeah.
3 choices, and some committees are very powerful, others not so much, but
Yeah.
still do important work. But
Well, I don't know. I can't imagine I'd have a choice. But if I was, and one of the things I like about the Senate is you're on 2 committees, right?
That's right.
And I don't
Which
know
is
how
a
many
lot of
there
work.
are. There 10, 15? There aren't that many, right? And
No,
if
they've
there's-
actually combined a couple of things.
Right.
So
But anyway, some of the things I'm passionate about are energy,
Right.
environment, agriculture.
Great.
But you know, all the committees have important health and welfare.
yeah, I don't know how they
Yeah.
get done all the stuff they do.
Yeah.
Especially the appropriations committees. That's one actually, as powerful as it is, I wouldn't want to be on there because they're never on the floor.
Right.
Because they're always working in their committee, and I like to be on the floor to
Yeah.
raise my hand and butt in.
Right.
Because
right.
you really can make a difference in Vermont. One voice. I don't think people realize how open our system is. We're very fortunate here.
And with the Senate only being 30 people,
Right.
one Senate seat is pretty significant.
Yep.
And to be the first Libertarian senator would be quite cool.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
That'd be great. And
Yeah.
2 committees. That's a lot
Yeah.
of work.
Yeah. Yeah.
So no
I like
fooling
work.
around. I know you're a hard worker. You are. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about in the
Well, you know
minutes
what?
we've got?
We were talking about committees, and I
Yeah.
thought about the health committee, which is, you know, I've got like my own personal health beliefs, so
Right.
I'm not really like, it's not really my big thing professionally or anything, but we didn't really talk about mental health at all,
We should.
you know, and that's an area that I'm very compassionate about, and you know, maybe that's all I want to say. I mean, I don't have like policy ideas moving forward, but I think it's an area that needs more attention
Well,
in our society.
Yeah. You know, you talked about drugs. Most
Yeah.
of the folks using drugs out there have mental health issues. It's a big problem here in
Yep.
Vermont and elsewhere, but a lot of the situations that our police officers face, they're dealing with mental health issues.
And you know, the government's taken appropriate steps in
Right.
embedding mental health workers in police calls.
Yes.
I mean, what a great
Yeah,
great
isn't that-
thing.
that's
and,
wonderful.
And you know, and I just you know, shout out to the police that handle those situations for years without mental health workers. I mean, they're out there, and,
Yeah.
and you know, it's really difficult work and
And I don't know if you
important
knew
work.
this, one thing our legislature finally did, they always had health care in one committee and mental health in another committee. And I think Representative Donahue and others fought for years to get, mental health is health care.
Yeah.
It's an illness, so they should be brought in with health care as a package, not, oh, and then mental health as it's something
Right.
different or something to be put aside, and it's not. And I think that now they've combined it into, so that the same committee deals with health care and mental health. And that's
This is the way it ought to be.
Yeah,
It really is
absolutely.
a healthcare issue.
yeah, it's not separate.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
a real problem. And I think a lot of the things that are, we've had shows on, and you were just talking about it, about having police officers work with mental health, work with social workers to help diffuse a situation when they're faced with it out there. Because you never know when you try to enter a home what you're dealing with.
Yeah.
You
right.
know. So have you you've been up to the legislature a lot and learned because I'll tell you something, there's so many nuances up there that you won't know till you get there, and nobody really understands, and you can't mess it up.
Yeah, there's a lot of funny rules and
Yeah.
a lot of funny ways of doing business, and I don't know them all. So I would
they'll
have some
teach you.
learning to do.
You're on a little
Yeah.
learning curve for
Yeah.
a while.
While I write my 10 or 20 bills to introduce on day one.
You'll have things to do. That's great.
Yeah.
I really wish you a lot of luck. I really
you.
do. So could you just tell me, what are the new towns? You have Stowe.
Braintree, Orange, and Stowe.
Wow, Braintree, Orange, that's huge.
Yeah.
I'm glad about Orange, because for a while there was half of
Yeah.
Orange and so that's good. that
Yeah,
it's,
Orange is almost part of Barrie, right?
well, exactly,
But Braintree is not part of Roxbury. It's just next door.
right.
Roxbury's, kind of fringe in the county.
Is Roxbury in this group too?
Roxbury is part of Washington County.
Oh, okay, yeah,
Yeah.
that's right, it always
Yeah.
was, that's right,
Yeah.
I was down there a couple of times. Because of the relationship between Montpelier and Roxbury now with the schools.
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you been following the changes in the state colleges?
Not too closely.
Oh.
I mean, I get tidbits through the news, but
Yeah,
yeah.
it's going to be something you're going to be dealing with in the legislature a lot this
Mm-hmm.
year, because they've done just so much to bring everybody together into the what is it, the Vermont State Universities, and there's so much to be done. What programming, bringing kids, keeping them here, what to do with the buildings we don't need anymore. It's a huge, huge issue, because it's not just like selling buildings. I mean, they've got loans out against them, mortgages, and all that sort of stuff. So it's very complicated for the legislature to weigh in. It's a big, but the chancellor has done a fabulous job.
Well, we need housing. If those are buildings we could
Yep.
convert to affordable
Wouldn't
housing.
that be great?
Yeah.
That'd be
We
great.
didn't talk about housing much,
No,
did we?
please do that. Go jump right in. Do
So-
you have any ideas?
Well, I think a lot of what's going on right now is a perfect storm of a lot of things. One is that, and even before COVID, city people were buying second homes up here
Sight
at
unseen.
a
it's-
rapid rate.
Right.
And then COVID came and that accelerated that. I
Right.
think things have kind of calmed down now a little bit, but it's still going
Yeah.
on. The market has softened some. But if you look at building, I look around the building and I still see high-end homes being built. I see government buildings being built. We've got a huge influx of ARPA money,
Yeah.
which is building government buildings
Right.
and other infrastructure, and taking workers that could be out building affordable housing
Right.
and diverting them to build this ARPA-funded work because it's there. And and those workers are also building second homes for wealthy people from the cities. Those, I think, contribute to the housing crisis. The workforce shortage, right?
right.
We didn't have enough people to build what we needed to build before
Right.
all these other things happened. And just affordability, right? People can't afford, workers
Right.
Can't afford to buy homes at the prices.
Yep.
There's a disparity between income
For sure.
and house costs.
Where
so-
you can afford a house out in rural Vermont, there's no transportation. So you
Right.
can go out and live, but try to get to your job if you don't have a car.
Here's an interesting fact from this week. I went to Realtor.com and I searched homes for sale in Barrie, and I looked for homes under $250,000, and there were 30 homes in Barrie.
Whoa.
That's pretty good, right?
That is good.
And the dots on the map, some of them are a little bit outside of Barrie. So then I said, well, that's pretty reasonable, right? And there were 3,000 something homes statewide. And then I said, well, let's try Montpelier. And I did the same search.
Right.
9. Okay? So my reaction to that is a little bit of snobism going on in the housing market, right? People
Right.
don't want to live in Barrie.
Right.
But what a great place.
Oh, Barry's great.
I love Barrie.
I do too.
And I would, if I was a young person starting out, I'd be
Yep.
more than happy to buy a starter home
Yep.
in Barrie.
It's a great, I don't understand that
You can buy
either.
affordable 2 families in Barrie.
Right.
And you can have an income property on half and
Right.
live in the other half.
Right.
And then when you're ready to move out to the country or wherever you want to live, you can hang on to that property and
right.
keep it as an income property. So
Yeah, Barry's great. I've always loved Barry, mainly because of the downtown, and someday it's going to
So
be...
is there really a housing crisis? If there's 30 houses for sale in Barrie under $250,000, I mean,
Yeah, well,
is that a crisis?
that's back to the people who aren't
Right.
working, and where are they getting their money?
Right, right.
It's just, good luck. There's a lot of issues.
Yeah.
And I hope the next time, if the next election, you're not looking back and it's the same written document. It's just, they
Yeah.
have to fix stuff. They've got to get serious.
I ran for the House in 96
Yep.
and
That's what I
98,
did, right?
and some of the issues still
It's
carry
still the
over from
same.
there.
And
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
understand what the reluctance
Yeah.
is to fix it. Because we have every 2 years, if you fix something and it's not 100% correct, you have an opportunity in a short time frame to change it.
We have
Right?
a constant ratcheting up
Yeah.
of things. Government takes one step, and then someone sees another step they can take, and they take another step, and they just keep making things tighter and tighter. I really think that as society matures, government should be able to ratchet down.
There you go.
We should be able to
One
get
can
by with
only
less
hope,
and less
Dexter.
government as we move forward. But you know, you look at what we started with in 1776, right?
Yep.
No government,
There.
right?
Look at us now.
Look at us now. Maybe it's time to go back a little bit.
Right, exactly. Well, I wish you a lot of luck.
Thank you, Pat.
It's a great area you're going to represent. So good. And thank you all for tuning in. This is Pat McDonald, your host for Vote for Vermont, where we asked you to keep listening beyond the sound bites.